Right now, across 47 states, something significant is happening that directly impacts how millions of Americans over 65 get behind the wheel. February 2026 marks a turning point in driver safety regulations, changes that have been quietly making their way through state legislatures over the past 18 months are finally taking effect. If you're 65 or older and still driving, these aren't minor tweaks to the system you've known for decades. We're talking about mandatory vision rescreening intervals, new cognitive assessment protocols in specific states, updated medical reporting requirements, and even changes to license renewal processes that now happen entirely online in some jurisdictions. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has been working with state DMVs to roll out these standards, and while the goal is keeping everyone safer on the road, understanding exactly what's required in your state could mean the difference between a smooth renewal and an unexpected trip back to the DMV. Some states are implementing grace periods, others are enforcing immediately, and knowing which camp your state falls into matters more than you might think. Let me be completely transparent with you here because this matters. When I started researching what's actually changing in February 2026 for drivers 65 and older, I discovered something important. There isn't a single sweeping federal law taking effect nationwide this February that specifically targets senior drivers. Now, before you click away thinking this video isn't relevant, stay with me, because what's actually happening is more complex and honestly more important for you to understand than any single law could be. The reality is that over the past 2 years, individual states have been revising their driver licensing requirements, and many of these changes affect older drivers in ways that aren't always clearly communicated. Some of these revisions are rolling out in phases throughout 2026. With several states choosing February as an implementation date because it falls after the holiday season but before the busy spring and summer driving months. What we're seeing is a patchwork approach across the United States, and that's actually why this information is so critical. In California, for instance, there have been ongoing discussions about implementing more frequent vision tests for drivers over 70, though the exact timeline keeps shifting based on DMV capacity and legislative approvals. Meanwhile, states like Florida and Arizona, which have massive populations of senior residents, are looking at completely different approaches. Florida has been considering a system where drivers over a certain age might need to renew in person rather than online, specifically so they can complete a basic vision screening. Arizona is exploring whether cognitive assessments should become part of the standard renewal process for drivers above 75. None of these are uniform, none of them follow the same schedule, and that's precisely the problem. It creates confusion, and confusion leads to people missing deadlines or not understanding what's required of them until they're standing at the DMV counter being told they can't renew without additional documentation. The insurance industry has also been pushing for changes, and this is where things get even more interesting. Insurance companies have been lobbying state governments to implement what they call evidence-based licensing requirements for older drivers. What does that actually mean in plain English? They want states to require additional testing or medical clearances based on age, arguing that it would reduce accident rates and therefore reduce their claim payouts. Now, whether you think that's fair or discriminatory depends on your perspective, but it's undeniably influencing policy decisions at the state level. Some states are resisting these pushes, citing age discrimination concerns, while others are embracing them, pointing to statistics about accident rates and reaction times. The truth is somewhere in the middle of this debate, and as a driver over 65, you're caught right in the center of it whether you ask to be or not. Let's talk about what might actually be required of you depending on where you live, because this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Vision testing has become the most common additional requirement for senior drivers across multiple states. The standard hasn't changed. You still need 20/40 vision in at least one eye to drive without restrictions in most states, but the frequency of testing has increased. Where you might have previously gone 8 or even 10 years between vision tests, some states are now requiring them every 4 years once you hit 65 and every 2 years after 70. This isn't just about reading an eye chart at the DMV either. Some states are implementing more comprehensive vision assessments that test peripheral vision, depth perception, and your ability to recover from glare, which matters tremendously for real-world driving situations like merging onto highways or driving at dusk. Medical reporting requirements are another area seeing significant changes, and this one tends to catch people off guard. Your doctor has always had the ability to report certain conditions to the DMV if they believed you were unsafe to drive, but many states are now making this reporting mandatory rather than discretionary for specific diagnoses. We're talking about conditions like epilepsy, certain types of diabetes, sleep apnea, dementia, and any condition that causes sudden loss of consciousness. The time frames matter here too. In some states, if you've had a seizure, you might need to be seizure-free for 6 months before you can drive again, while other states require a full year. If you're managing any chronic condition, it's worth having a frank conversation with your doctor about whether it needs to be reported and what that means for your license status. The last thing you want is to be blindsided by a suspension letter in the mail because a required report was filed and you didn't know it was coming. Now, here's something that doesn't get discussed enough but absolutely should: the online renewal situation. Many states moved to online renewals during the pandemic, and they've kept these systems in place because they're more efficient and cost-effective. Sounds great, right? For most people, it is. But several states have written into their online renewal systems that drivers over a certain age cannot renew online and must appear in person. The stated reason is usually to ensure proper vision screening, but the practical effect is that it creates an additional burden specifically for older drivers, many of whom might have mobility issues or transportation challenges that make getting to a DMV office more difficult. Some states offer mobile DMV services or partner with senior centers to provide renewal services, but you have to know these options exist to take advantage of them. They're not always advertised clearly, and DMV websites can be notoriously difficult to navigate, especially if you're not particularly comfortable with technology. There's also been movement on the licensing renewal cycle itself in various states. Traditionally, most states used 5- or 8-year renewal cycles, but some are shortening these for older drivers. Instead of renewing every 8 years, you might find yourself renewing every 4 or even every 2 years once you reach a certain age threshold. This varies wildly. Some states start this at 65, others at 70, and some don't have age-based renewal differences at all. The argument in favor of shorter renewal cycles is that it catches vision changes, cognitive decline, or medical issues sooner, potentially preventing accidents. The argument against it is that age alone isn't a reliable predictor of driving ability, and there are plenty of 75-year-olds who are safer drivers than some 40-year-olds. Both arguments have merit, but again, as a senior driver, you're living with the consequences of whichever approach your state has chosen. Cognitive testing is the most controversial piece of this entire puzzle, and it's where states are moving most cautiously. A handful of states have pilot programs exploring cognitive assessments as part of license renewal for seniors, but full implementation has been slow because there's significant disagreement about what tests are appropriate, who should administer them, and what scores should disqualify someone from driving. The tests being explored range from simple memory and reaction time assessments to more complex evaluations of executive function and decision-making. Some advocacy groups argue that these tests are essential for public safety, while others, including major senior advocacy organizations, argue they're discriminatory and that driving ability should be assessed through actual road tests rather than cognitive screening. This debate will likely continue for years, but in the meantime, some states are quietly implementing these assessments in limited capacity, and if you're in one of those states, you might encounter them at renewal time. Let's address the financial aspect of all this because it's not insignificant. More frequent renewals mean more renewal fees. Additional testing means additional costs. If you need to get medical clearance from your doctor, that's likely an office visit copay. If your state requires an eye exam from an optometrist rather than accepting the basic DMV vision screening, that's another out-of-pocket expense, especially if you're already getting regular eye exams through your insurance, and this requires an extra visit specifically for the DMV paperwork. These costs add up, and for seniors on fixed incomes, they can represent a real burden. Some states have fee reduction programs for seniors or low-income individuals, but again, You usually have to ask about them specifically. They're not automatically applied. Road testing is coming back into the conversation as well, particularly in states where legislators are trying to find a middle ground between doing nothing and implementing comprehensive cognitive screening. The idea is simple: require an actual behind-the-wheel road test at certain age milestones, say 75, and then every few years after that. On paper, this makes sense because driving is a practical skill, and a road test directly assesses whether someone can safely operate a vehicle in real conditions. In practice, though, DMVs are already backlogged with teen driver testing, and adding senior driver testing into the mix would require significant resource investment. Some states are exploring partnerships with driving schools or using certified examiners outside the DMV system to conduct these tests, but we're still in early stages of figuring out how this would work at scale. Technology is also entering the picture in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade ago. Some states are exploring the use of driving simulation technology to assess older drivers, where you sit in a simulator and drive through various scenarios while the system measures your reaction times, decision-making, and ability to handle unexpected situations. These simulators can test things that would be difficult or dangerous to test on an actual road, like how you'd respond to a child running into the street or a tire blowout on the highway. The technology is expensive, though, which means implementation is limited to states with bigger budgets and DMVs with more resources. There's also questions about how well simulator performance correlates with actual driving ability. Some people who are excellent drivers get nervous in simulator environments and perform poorly, while others might do great in the simulator but lack the real-world judgment that comes with decades of driving experience. Insurance implications deserve serious attention here because they intersect with these regulatory changes in ways that directly affect your wallet. Some insurance companies are offering discounts for seniors who voluntarily take defensive driving courses or who agree to use telematics devices that monitor their driving habits. These devices track things like speed, braking patterns, time of day you drive, and miles driven. And if you're a safe, low-mileage driver, you might qualify for significant discounts. On the flip side, if states implement more stringent testing requirements and you have to take multiple attempts to pass a renewal test, that could potentially be visible to insurers and affect your rates. The intersection of DMV records and insurance underwriting is complex and varies by state, but it's worth understanding that these systems do communicate with each other to some extent. One thing that's not changing but bears repeating is the importance of self-assessment and family conversations about driving ability. All the laws and regulations in the world can't replace honest evaluation of your own capabilities behind the wheel. If you're finding that night driving is becoming more challenging, or that you're less comfortable in heavy traffic, or that you're having more close calls than you used to, those are signals worth paying attention to. Many states offer voluntary driving assessments through occupational therapy programs or driving rehabilitation specialists, and these can provide objective feedback about your abilities and strategies for staying safe on the road longer. These assessments aren't about taking your license away. They're about identifying specific areas where you might need to make adjustments, whether that's avoiding certain driving situations, upgrading your vehicle's safety features, or working on specific skills. The broader context here is that our population is aging, and we're living longer, more active lives than previous generations. In 1970, only about 10% of the U.S. population was over 65. Today, it's approaching 20%, and that number will keep climbing. More seniors driving for more years means transportation policy has to evolve, but it has to evolve in ways that balance safety with mobility and independence. Taking away someone's ability to drive isn't a trivial matter. In many parts of the country, especially rural areas, losing your license means losing your independence, your ability to get to medical appointments, your social connections, and your quality of life. That's why these policy discussions are so charged and why states are struggling to find the right approach. So what do you actually need to do with all this information? First, find out exactly what your state requires right now and what changes are coming. Don't rely on second-hand information or Facebook posts. Go directly to your state DMV website or call them. Ask specifically about requirements for drivers in your age group. renewal cycles, testing requirements, and any changes scheduled for implementation in 2026. Second, if you haven't had your vision checked recently, do that proactively rather than waiting until renewal time. Same goes for discussing your overall health and any medications with your doctor in the context of driving safety. Third, consider taking a defensive driving course designed for seniors. Many are available online now. They often qualify you for insurance discounts, and they can genuinely refresh your knowledge of current traffic laws and safe driving practices. Fourth, have conversations with family members about long-term planning. What does staying mobile look like for you over the next decade, and what alternatives to driving might you want to explore as a backup plan? And finally, stay informed about changes in your state because this is an evolving situation, and what's true today might be different a year from now.